Now, joining us from Texas is Dr. Frank Musma, who is an international relations professor, and also joining us from Moscow, Dr. Olga Krasnyak, who is an international relations professor, also at the National University in Moscow. Thank you very much for being here with us on Q News. I'll start with you, Dr. Musma. So, how do you assess this meeting between Witkoff and President Putin?
Thank you. And we could start we cannot just shoot the subject into only Ukraine. Yeah, we know that the United States and Russia, they've been abandoned the discussions and negotiations, for global affairs and all that for the last 3 years, I think. And now, we're talking about Ukraine, we're talking about Iran, we're talking about Houthi, we're talking about influence of Wagners in Africa. We're talking about the market of gas and energy in Europe. So it's going to be like a lot of talks, not just only about Ukraine. Now, if we want to talk about Ukraine, of course, it's going to be still negotiating the demands of security from the side of Ukraine and the demands of Russia of controlling few parts that they are trying to control, keep it, somehow under like international umbrella laws, elections, whatever it is. So the negotiations so far in that manner, and there is a progress, but 3 years conflict is going to take some time.
And coming to you, Dr. Krasnyak, how do you assess the meeting? And do you think Russia has a willingness to compromise here?
Well, I'm not really sure that we can talk about compromise because indeed this war is happening more than 3 years, and these reasons which led to this conflict, they needed to be somehow resolved. And in this case, acknowledging Russia's interest and listening what actually Russia's security reasons. So that would be something what we would expect from the American side. But still, when we see a few rounds of diplomatic negotiations on a highest level and between different parties involved, Russian and American parties, so definitely it's a very positive attitude because indeed it is not just only about the Ukrainian issues, but the stabilization of world politics. So we're talking basically about more stabilized world affairs, which is in interest of America and Russia as well.
And Dr. Musma, coming back to you, do you think Trump has the right strategy using these channels that the back channels? He's had open conversations, of course, with Putin. He's also sent his envoy. Are these credible efforts to find a peace?
Definitely, yes. Yeah, we need to talk about it. We cannot just like applying pressure and applying sanctions on Russia, and we're expecting, Russia is going to come up and say, okay, I'm going to accept your conditions. Second, I said from number one, from this, talking about this particular conflict, this conflict is not going to end in a war circumstances. There is no winner in the ground. There is no winner with atomic powers, so that will be the destruction of the world. And I said from number one, from day number one, that this conflict is going to be solved on a round table. Number two, I had an imagine that we're going to have now a new Berlin Wall, which is new Kiev war. That's what I expected and imagined from day one, which is I think is going to happen like that. Because as an example, the Europeans are trying to offer sort of security in the west part of Ukraine, like from the western side of Kiev, as an example. And Russia is trying to control the areas in the east. So, like to me, I imagine that is going to be like the two campaign, like before, like during the Second World War, from Kiev and east and from Kiev and west, which is I think that's how it's going to end. Now, for Russia, as an example, of course, they want to control those lands for many names. You could name it from the name of security and not allowing Ukraine to join NATO or whatever it is, whatever name that they wanna use. But definitely, it could be solved, from perspective of Russia, because all what it takes is those areas, which is most of them loyal to Russia, that they vote for that independence or they vote for being like under the hemisphere of Russia. Now, based on that, we need a direct discussion. Now, before that, before the conflict, the United States and Russia, they were in like a constant dialogue about the global affairs. And we know now there is a concern in the United States here that the biggest country globally that is growing now, especially in an economic perspective, is China. It's not to the benefit of the United States that China and Russia will be close to each other. So the United States is trying to maybe reach sort of agreement, not gonna be maybe like the optimal one that maybe the alliance would like or accept, or maybe it's not gonna be 100% accepted here in the United States, maybe by the Democrats, but it's for the benefit of the United States to separate Russia from China, because that's the main interest of the United States now, is to concentrate on economy. And now we know that the biggest factor in the world is economy, more than army and armed forces. So for now, there is a lot of goals for the United States beside Ukraine. We're talking about Ukraine now because it is the actual conflict that we see in the ground. But there is a lot of global affairs, especially now. Now, like Witkoff, he went to Oman to meet with the Iranians. So there is a lot of talk here between United States, Russia on the subject of Iran as well.
Okay, I noticed you talk a lot about what benefits the United States and not so much about what benefits Ukraine. But we're going to come back to that, Dr. Mosmar. I'll come back to you, Dr. Krasnyak. Russia's been accused of using these talks to stall. Is that fair?
Well, I do not believe as it would be a fair accusation. So we are interested to promote our interests, and if we will be ready, or if we will be sure that the United States will be ready to listen exactly what would be Russia's concerns and Russia's interests, and I think maybe these diplomatic talks maybe like a fast track for some negotiations, because well given the serious questions which are discussed, and given the actual architecture of the future world order, so all the things cannot be just decided very quickly. So maybe it is expected that these diplomatic negotiations will they include a few rounds with many parties still involved, and yes, we might expect maybe a few more months just to come closer to an end of this conflict.
And of course, coming back to you, Dr. Masma, while these talks are going on, we have the European allies sending a lot of money, and also we have Zelensky pushing for air defense systems. Isn't it right that this should be going on when these talks look like they're going to be designed to make Ukraine the loser?
Well, we have to distinguish between the stance of the United States and the European Union. And we have to understand something else. Like the world that we live in now is definitely different than the world after the Second World War. The Second World War and the entire structure of the war happens in the West against, the expansion of the Soviet Union. And nowadays we don't have Soviet Union. So this is number one. Number two, we didn't have European Union. Now we have European Union. So the structure of the alliances between the United States and Europeans is kind of different now. We cannot just keep relaying that, to the whole organized global organizations that have been established and formed after the Second World War. And this, because of that, and because of the new situation, the European Union kept relying on the United States for defense and for foot soldiers in the ground. And actually, most of them they neglected that. Even England, like recently, they start recruiting for army. Now, of course, Ukraine is the east part of Europe. I think Europeans still consider Russia is the Soviet Union. They cannot deal with Russia with the new Russia. And not the second, which is our third, the most important point, which is energy. The Western Union, I'm sorry, the European Union, they're still relying on Russia on natural resources. And in the meantime, they're still considering Russia as an enemy. And another factor is that the United States is trying to invest in their resources for energy and all that. And the market for the United States is European Union. So definitely there should be a talk here between the United States and Russia and maybe the European Union and how they're going to split that market. And definitely I feel sorry for Ukraine that they fell in the middle of that. But the point is, like, yeah, they are the closest portion beside Russia, and European Union consider Russia is an enemy. In the meantime, they are a market for Russia for the gas. So there is like a whole of like a new structure. That's what I'm thinking. Like the United States, when they are meeting now with the Russians, they are discussing different things, not just like stopping the war, because stopping the war is not going to end this or solve the conflict. The conflict like rose from the new structures that happen now after after the structure that happened after the Second World War, if that gives sense.
Okay, solutions to the war. There has been one that's been put forward. Kellogg has put forward a Berlin model, Dr. Krasnyak, where Ukraine is carved up like East and West, as Berlin was after the Second World War and during the Cold War. What do you make of that? Russia would be delighted with that, wouldn't they?
Well, I do not believe Russia would accept this, but you know what I was thinking? So we have Mr. Witkoff and a special envoy to Russia on this conflict, and Mr. Kellogg, special envoy to Kiev. And it seems to me that both of them, they have maybe opposing views how this conflict will be resolved, and maybe it leads us to some opposing positions within American foreign policy establishment. So because definitely what Mr. Witkoff is saying, and basically maybe not saying, but his position exemplifies or shows that willingness to talk to Russia, and the position of is exemplified by Mr. Kellogg is the opposite, and maybe it leads us to some like a problematic issue of American domestic policy.
And Trump is trying to get his hands on Ukraine's minerals as payback for some of the money that they have sent for defense against the Russians. Do you see, Dr. Musmar, there's a chance of this happening and Ukraine giving in to Trump's demands?
Well, I'm not going to say Trump's demands. I'm going to say America's demands. I don't like personalization in business, and politics, because at the end, Donald Trump is representing the Republican Party. So this is one. Maybe he has his image or something, and they work in that hemisphere. But as you said, definitely, like if we're gonna think how this conflict is gonna end, just to think. Now, Europeans, they're not gonna be accepted at all by Russians to have forces in the east part of Kiev. Impossible. Russia is not going to keep going with the talks. Now, it's not going to accept American soldiers there, but an investment project that benefit the United States and give sort of securities to Ukraine in the east part of Kiev. So I think that will be somehow sort of security to Ukraine. And we saw that conflict in the White House between President Zelensky and President Trump when President Zelensky was trying to insist on assuring the security. And actually, what was the administration here trying to explain for him that that's enough security. At the end, it representing the United States, and Russia, of course, is going to be holding that. Now, third, what Russia wants, like at the end, Russia is not going to back up from those lands that they took over. Impossible. And in the meantime, if we need to keep getting Russia and absorb it to our direction away from China, we have to have some compromises. So Europe has to do something. The United States has to do something, and Russia has to do something. As we said, it's a round table. There is no winner here. Impossible in this war. If we're gonna say there is a winner on the ground, this means we're gonna destroy the world. Which is definitely it's gonna be a round table, and within that round table, we're gonna see how we're gonna solve that conflict. Everybody has to compromise. Everybody.
And Dr. Krasnyak, let me ask you about the Russian public's view when it comes to these talks between Russia and the United States, with the Steve Witkoff visit. How is the Russian public reacting to that?
Well, I think it would be a more positive attitude because we see the United States played a key role in this conflict in Ukraine. Indirect role supplying Ukraine with weapon and providing this financial help and surveillance and anything. And it seems that Ukraine became a burden for the United States, and it's kind of like a big problem. They want just to push it away. So, and in this case, any round of diplomatic negotiations or any diplomatic attitude or any willingness to talk with Russia and to listen to Russia, it is acknowledged as a good positive attitude. So yes, we welcome this attitude.
And Dr. Musmar, how realistic do you think the prospect of a ceasefire is in the coming weeks?
I think it will happen. It takes time, maybe it will happen. You know, at the beginning, Trump said he's going to finish it in a couple of hours. You know, of course, you know, this is like, you know, an expression. But, you know, with a talk like this, I'm expecting in a few months, maybe we're going to see an actual thing happening in the ground. But we have to understand something that now United States back again to talk with Russia directly, which is something good because this is, you know, something very important for the global affair. And something else that there is so many things going on in the world now. It's not just Ukraine. And I told you, I feel sorry for the Ukrainian to be in the middle of that. But in the meantime, you know, the globe is different now. Like we have so many aspects. We have the economy, we have the oil prices, the energy, wars in the Middle East. So we have so many things, and it's very important for the two global powers to communicate and solve these problems.
And having Trump in the White House, Dr. Krasnyak, must be the best thing that's happened to Russia.
Well, I would not say that because, Russia and the United States have very bad relations recently. So we're not dependent on the United States. The United States do not depend on us. But actually, these global security issues, they do depend on Russia's attitude. So in this case, I think it doesn't matter for us who would be in the White House because we have our goals, foreign policy goals. We have our resources. We have our military power, and it is something what makes us a truly sovereign state, truly independent state. This is something what matters for us. But who will be in the White House? So it is a second question because we see the politics of any new administration can be totally different from the previous one. So that is why it is not for us, you know, just to look at it, but we have our own attitude.
And Dr. Musmar, I think I saw you shaking your head there. You don't think that Trump is a preferable president of the United States for President Putin?
I don't look at politics from this point of view or perspective. Why? Because there is no love and hate in politics. There's strategical benefits. And I was expecting actually whoever is going to win, Trump or at that time Kamala Harris. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Like I think the negotiation and discussion is going to happen. Why? Because you know, as you know, your guest said, it become a burden in the United States. United States soldiers, economy. United States now has a lot of debt. Russia too. You know, they suffer. You know, inside. You know, from economy and all that. So there is no really taste for this war to keep going. Of course, you know, we're gonna have to mention the people that die in a daily basis. Now, Europe cannot keep going with that. United States cannot. Russia cannot. So it's strategic benefit. And countries doesn't have like they don't build their decisions based on love and hate. So a lot of people say, "Oh, love, there is a good relationship or love, whatever it is, between Putin and Trump." That's not true. You know, Donald Trump is a businessman. He's a deal maker, and he's trying to find a deal. Now, maybe that to people in a different way, different perspective, that you know he has a good relationship with Putin. Let it be. If that will solve the problem, why not?
Okay. Well, thank you very much to both of you joining us here on Q News on the program. That was Dr. Frank Musmar, who's joining us from Texas, and also Dr. Olga Krasnyak joining us from Moscow. Thank you very much for both of you being on the program.